They saw him before they heard him, dust curling around his boots like smoke. Eyes hidden beneath a battered hat, coat hanging heavy with road miles and secrets. The sound of his spurs was the only law that moved in Stillwater that morning. Stillwater wasn't a town, it was a wound, one dirt road, a shuttered saloon, a station with no trains. It had once boomed with silver and sin, but both had long since dried up. Now it stood waiting. For what, nobody knew until he walked in, the boy at. The water pump stopped. The blacksmith straightened from his forge, and the sheriff's widow, who sat alone under the shade of the old hanging tree, squinted toward the stranger like she recognized something she'd buried. He walked past them all and stopped at the general store. Its sign hung sideways, its windows half-boarded. A bell above the door didn't ring when he stepped inside. It was too tired to try. The shopkeeper looked up. "Don't get much traffic." The man nodded once. "Don't plan to stay long. You looking for something?" "Man? Name? Calder?" The shopkeeper's hand stilled over the ledger. "What business?" The stranger looked at him with the kind of stare that made men forget questions. "Old business, long past due." Outside, wind rolled through the town, stirring dust like ghosts. The sheriff's office was dark, empty, except for the badge, nailed to the desk still blood-stained, and a ledger half-filled with names crossed out in red. The stranger picked it up, flipped through. Calder's name wasn't there, but another was. Joseph Pike, Stillwater's mayor, and the last man to see the sheriff alive. The stranger left the office and walked toward the mayor's house, a tall white thing at the far edge of town, where the dust hadn't yet claimed the curtains. He knocked once, the door opened, and a shotgun stared back. "You lost?" Pike asked. "No," the stranger said. "I'm where I need to be." Then the screen door exploded inward as he kicked it in, steel flashing from his hip. The blast echoed down Stillwater's single road, and the dust began to move again. The mayor's shotgun clattered to the floor. Smoke hung in the room like guilt. Joseph Pike lay sprawled on the wooden floorboards, one shoulder torn and bleeding, hand twitching toward a second pistol beneath the couch. The stranger stepped on it. Pike groaned, eyes wide with pain and fear. You don't know what you're doing." The stranger holstered his gun. "You're wrong, I know exactly." He dragged a chair to the center of the room, sat, and waited as Pike writhed. "You're gonna bleed out," he said. "Unless you start talking. Talking won't stop Calder." "I don't need to stop him. I just need to find him." Pike's breath hitched. "He's not here." The stranger's voice didn't change. "But he was." That much was true? The mansion reeked of recent presents, half-packed crates, still warm hearth, empty whiskey glass with fresh fingerprints. 2 weeks ago, Pike rasped. He passed through, left north, toward Junction Ridge. The stranger nodded once. "And the sheriff?" "Dead, buried in the arroyo with the others." Calder made sure of it. Silence settled between them like ash. "You done?" Pike whispered. The stranger stood. "Not yet." He walked to the fireplace, grabbed a framed photo from the mantel. It showed Calder standing beside 3 men, one of them the sheriff, another Pike himself. The fourth had been scratched out. He pocketed the photo on his way out. He paused by the door. "You should patch that wound. And if I don't?" The stranger looked back. "Then Stillwater will finally have something worth burying." The sun was sinking as he saddled his horse. Shadows stretched long across the ground, twisting through the empty town like fingers of judgment. May watched him from the old. Well, she hadn't said a word when he rode in? Still hadn't, but now she spoke. "You find what you were looking for?" "No," he said, "just one more ghost pointing at the next." She nodded slowly. "You're chasing a man who doesn't get chased." "Calder owns every badge from here to the divide." "I'm not wearing a badge." "That don't mean you ain't carrying one." The stranger looked up at the hills. "Where's Junction Ridge?" May tilted her head. "About 4 days north. You'll freeze at night, starve by noon." He tightened the saddle straps. "I've ridden through worse. You'll ride alone?" He paused. "No, not this time." She watched him ride out of town. Dust curling behind him, and for the first time in a long while, she felt something like wind stir inside her, something close to hope. They made it past Dry Creek by sundown, where the wind howled like it remembered. Old murders. The stranger didn't talk much, but May filled the silence easy stories of outlaw raids, of gold gone missing in riverbeds, of a marshal who disappeared into the cliffs and came back with eyes that didn't blink. She asked his name once. He didn't answer. So she started calling him stranger. It fit. The trail narrowed as the pines thickened, frost glinting along the roots like the land itself was warning them to turn back. But they didn't, not when they found the signpost carved into a dead tree. Junction Ridge 2 miles. That night they camped on a rise above a frozen ravine. May tended the fire. The stranger sat sharpening a blade that looked older than either of them. "You knew Calder?" she asked finally. "I knew what he became. Was he ever different?" He didn't answer right away. "Once," he said. "Before the war. Before he figured out fear was more profitable than justice." May watched the flames flicker. "My father wore a badge," she said. "Taught me how to shoot. Taught me how to spot a lie by the way a man grips his belt." "He's still alive?" She shook her head. Calder had him hanged in front of the courthouse. Sighed. He was conspiring with rustlers. Whole town knew it wasn't. True, but nobody stopped it. The stranger's jaw tightened. "That sounds like Calder." "No," May said. "That sounds like cowardice." A silence settled. Then came the sound of hooves. Distant. Measured. Both of them stood. The fire hissed as May kicked snow over it. The stranger drew his revolver and nodded toward the north. Ridge. 2 riders. No lanterns. 2. Clean in their lines to be bandits, too confident to be alone. The stranger watched them disappear behind a rock shelf. "Scouts," he said. "Of who?" "Calder. Or someone worse." May loaded her rifle. "Worse?" The stranger holstered his weapon. "The ones who follow orders without knowing what they're for." They didn't sleep that night. Not really. By dawn, the frost had thickened, and so had the hunt. Junction Ridge was carved into the side of a mountain like a scar that never healed. What used to be a mining outpost had turned into a fortress for ghosts. No law, no mercy, just men with rifles who didn't ask questions. They rode in slow. May wore her coat drawn tight, rifle slung across her back. The stranger kept his hands visible, but close enough to steal to send a message. The townsfolk, what was left of them, watched from broken porches and shattered windows. Most didn't meet their eyes. The ones who did had the look of people too tired to care if they died today or tomorrow. May whispered. "They're scared." "They're trained to be," the stranger said. "Fear's easier to manage than loyalty." They tied the horses near what once was a church. Now, missing its bell and any sense of holiness, a saloon sat crooked at the town's heart. That's where the stranger walked. Inside, smoke clung to the rafters. A single piano key rang out before being silenced. Men looked up, then away. Except one. He sat in the back corner, face like a chiseled warning, eyes pale and wrong. He didn't move when they entered. Didn't blink. Just waited. The stranger walked to him. "You Reeve?" The man nodded once. "I heard you ride for Calder," the stranger said. "I ride for pay," Reeve said. "But Calder tips well." "I'm not looking to hire." "Didn't think so." They stared at each other like dogs before a fight. Then the stranger threw something on the table. The photo, the one from Pike's mantle. Reeve glanced at it. "You digging up bones, friend? Just cutting out rot?" Reeve smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. "You want Calder, he's north, deep, where even maps lie. You'll take us." Reeve leaned back. "Why would I do that?" May stepped forward. "Because if you don't, I'll bury your bones so deep, even the Vorms won't remember where." A beat passed, then Reeve stood. 3-day ride, he said. Rough trail, wolves in the woods and worse on 2 legs. "We've ridden through worse," the stranger said. Reeve looked at him. Double quotes. "No, you haven't." That night, as they camped on the edge of the ridge, Reeve sat apart from the fire. May watched him. "His eyes," she whispered. "They single quotes read ... empty." The stranger nodded. "Like someone carved the man out and left only the killer." May pulled her coat tighter. "Then we better hope we don't blink first." The trail north of Junction Ridge wasn't a path, it was a scar through thickets of black pine. Twisted rock and the kind of cold that cracked bone. No signs, no mercy. Just snow, silence, and the stink of something watching. Reeve led without speaking. His horse knew the way, or maybe it didn't need to. It moved like it was used to death ahead. May stayed close to the stranger, her eyes scanning the trees, rifle never more than an inch from ready. She hated Reeve, not just because of the way he moved or the scars along his jaw, but because he didn't fear anything, not even dying the stranger. Though he watched everything. Noticed the snapped branches, the disturbed snow, the scent of smoke that didn't come from their fire. "We're being shadowed," he said low to May. "Bandits?" Worse, hunters. She looked at Reeves' back. Friends of his? Doubt he has any. They camped beneath a rock outcrop that night. The fire was small. Reeves sat sharpening a long hunting knife, eyes reflecting flame without blinking. May asked him finally, "Why do you ride with Calder?" Reeves didn't stop sharpening. "He let me kill," he said. May stiffened. "You needed permission?" "No," Reeves said. "Just a reason." The stranger spoke. "And what's the reason now?" Reeves stopped. "You..." The first arrow came at dawn. It thunked into the tree beside May's head. She rolled instantly. Rifle up, eyes scanning white snow and black trunks. Shadows moved. Then the howling began. Not wolves. Men. Painted faces, furs, machetes. Rogue trackers, mercenaries thrown out from the rail wars. Now surviving by taking contracts no one else would. Reeves stood like it was nothing. He drew 2 knives. "Don't shoot till you see the whites," he said. May snapped. "Their eyes?" "No, their teeth. They came fast." The stranger fired clean, dropping one before he reached the ridge. May took out 2 more, precise and hard. Reeve? He danced with death, slashing, spinning, never making a sound. By the time the last mercenary ran, 3 bodies steamed on the snow and the trees dripped red. May leaned on her knees, panting. Reeve cleaned his blades calmly. "You said this trail was rough," she hissed. He nodded. "It gets worse." The stranger looked into the woods. "We're getting close." Reeve smiled faintly, close enough to hear him breathing. By the 3rd day, the pines thinned into frostbitten hills and hollow stumps, the remnants of a forest Calder had burned years ago to trap a militia column. Nothing grew here anymore. Not even fear. The center of the clearing stood a chapel, blackened wood, roof sagging. A bell tower without a bell. May slowed her horse. "What is this place?" Reeve spoke for the first time in hours. "This is..." Where Calder stopped pretending he was a man. The stranger dismounted. "You sure he's here?" Reeve didn't answer, just nodded at the door. They moved in with rifles drawn. Inside, the pews were smashed. The altar was gone, but in its place stood something else, a map carved into the floorboards, with trails, symbols, and a series of red XS. The center, a star carved so deep it splintered the wood. The stranger knelt, ran his fingers over the symbol. "This is where he keeps his network connected," he murmured. "Roots for arms, hiding places, dead drops." May looked at the walls. They were covered in names, carved, scratched, some fresh, some old, some already crossed out. She found one near the door. Ibunshi turned slowly. "This yours?" The stranger didn't move. "Not anymore." Then came the creak. From behind the pulpit. May turned, first rifle raised. A man stepped into view. Arms out, no weapon. He looked like he'd once been a preacher. Torn collar, blood-stained cuffs. His eyes, though hollow and lit with something that didn't belong to God. "You walk in shadows," he said, voice dry and frayed. "But you carry fire." The stranger stepped forward. "Where's Calder?" The man grinned. "Farther than you're willing to go." Reeve moved fast, grabbed him by the collar, and slammed him into the wall. "Try us." The man didn't flinch. "He's waiting where maps bleed, the hollow of the iron flame." The stranger narrowed his eyes. "That's the story." "It was," the man rasped, "until Calder made it real." Reeve released him. He slid to the floor, laughing softly. May whispered, "What the hell is the hollow?" The stranger stood. "An old mine. Collapsed, sealed, said to be cursed." Reeve smirked. "That's the kind of place Calder would use." They stepped out into the cold again. Breath fogging. No one spoke for a long moment. Then May said, "So, what now?" The stranger looked to the north, to the line where the dead trees ended and the mountains began. "Now we ride to where even ghosts don't follow." The trail vanished an hour past the chapel. No tracks. No road, only jagged black rock and wind. That whispered like it remembered names. Reeve led them through a canyon so narrow they had to walk the horses single file. Shadows stretched long across the cliffs, and every sound, a boot scuff, a stone tumble, echoed like a warning. May whispered, "Feels like a trap." Reeve didn't glance back. "It is." The stranger, at the rear, kept his hand near the grip of his Colt. By dusk, the canyon widened into a basin of charred stone. At the center, a rusted iron elevator sunk halfway into the ground. The entrance to the mine once called the Hollow of the Iron Flame. May stared at it. "That thing doesn't look like it's moved in years." Reeve approached and pressed a hand to the lever. "It hasn't." Then he twisted a hidden latch beneath the platform. With a groan, the elevator shook and began to descend, swallowed by the earth. The stranger raised an eyebrow. "You've been here before." Reeve said nothing. They tethered the horses under a rock shelf and lit 3 lanterns. May checked her rifle. "What exactly are we expecting down there?" The stranger answered, "Calder doesn't hide behind men. He hides behind memory and pain." Reeve added, "And steel." The mine shaft was deeper than it looked. Their boots echoed as they descended, the air growing colder with each level. Shafts branched in all directions, boarded over or collapsed. At the bottom, a long tunnel led into a carved chamber lit by lanterns that shouldn't have been burning. He was waiting. Calder. Older than the photo, but taller, sharper. His eyes were like cracked ice. His hands rested on the arms of a metal chair that looked welded from old rail iron. Behind him stood 2 guards, rifles low, but ready. Calder smiled. "I wondered which one of you would lead him here." Reeve stepped forward. "I don't lead," he said. "I deliver." Calder stood. He moved slowly, like a man who had spent years calculating weight. "Eli Boone," he said. The stranger didn't respond. "I never thought you'd make it this far. But then again, you always were too proud to die quietly." May raised her rifle. "No more talk, no more riddles. This ends here." Calder looked at her, eyes gleaming. "Oh, it ends. But not for all of us." Then the walls echoed with metal, dozens of boots, rifles cocking from side tunnels. Guards poured in 20, maybe more. May's eyes widened. Reeve didn't move. The stranger slowly drew his Colt and said, "Then let's get loud." The chamber exploded into motion. May dropped first, rolling behind a stack of rusted mining crates as bullets shattered the stone wall behind her. The stranger pivoted left, firing 2 clean shots. Both hit. Reeve disappeared into the smoke like a blade in water. Calder didn't flinch. He stood calmly, watching as chaos bloomed around him like he'd lit the match on purpose. Guards swarmed the chamber, their rifles roaring, echoing through the mine like thunder caged in steel. May ducked and fired, dropping a man charging from the left tunnel. The stranger moved with deadly precision, low, tight, no wasted bullets. He pushed forward, closer to Calder, using pillars and debris for cover. "May!" he shouted. "Flank right!" She nodded, sliding under a metal beam, boots slipping on the gravel. 2 more shots rang out, hers, and 2 more enemies fell. Reeve emerged from a shadowed alcove behind the enemy ranks. He wasn't shooting, he was slashing, silent, efficient. One after another. His coat was streaked with blood within seconds, then a flash, dynamite. One of the guards lit a fuse and hurled it across the chamber. The stranger dove, dragging May behind a broken rail cart as the blast cracked the ceiling. Dust rained down. Part of the tunnel collapsed, trapping 3 guards and sealing an exit. The stranger coughed, eyes stinging. "We need to break Calder's line," May pointed. "He's falling back." Sure enough, Calder had moved, retreating through an iron doorway with 2 men covering his path. Reeve saw it too. He bolted after him, bloodied knives in hand. "Reeve!" the stranger called, but he was gone. They cleared the remaining guards in seconds. Smoke hung thick. Bodies littered the stone floor. The stranger and May moved fast through the door Calder had taken, following the echo of boots and the flicker of retreating LANTE. Our NLIGT. The tunnel beyond sloped downward. Why would he go deeper? May asked, breath tight. Because no one follows a dead man into a grave. The stranger said, Then they heard the sound, the metallic groan of something. Massive being UNLATCHED, then the sudden slam of steel closing, a vault door. They reached it. Seconds too late. Sealed. Thick. Ancient. The stranger stepped forward, pressed his hand to the iron from the other side. Calder's voice echoed faintly. You wanted the truth, Boone. You're standing on it. Then silence. May stared at the door. What now? The stranger looked around, studied the walls, and spotted it. Another tunnel, carved at an angle, narrow but passable. He holstered his Colt. We go deeper. The tunnel narrowed until they had to crouch. Lantern light flickered across the stone, casting twisted shadows that seemed to move even when they didn't. The air was damp, bitter, and beneath it all, something smelled of rust and rot. May whispered. This place wasn't built for mining. The stranger nodded. It was built to bury. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber, wider than any vault, deeper than any grave. Rows of old crates stacked to the ceiling, stamped with faded brands. Union Pacific CS Armory. Confederate medical div. This is a war archive, May breathed. Hidden. No, the stranger said. Preserved. Weapons, documents, uniforms, even batas, wrapped in tarps. Tagged. And forgotten. And in the middle of the chamber stood something colder than all of it. Rail line. Single dash track. Ending in the stone. With an engine that had no coal hatch. No. Wheels. No steam valves, just polished black metal and rivets that shimmered like blood under LANTERNLIGT. May stepped closer. What the hell is this? The stranger stared. It's not a train. Reeves' voice came from behind them. It's a message. They turned. He was cut. Bleeding from the side, one eye half swollen shut, but alive. The vault was misdirection, he said. Calder wanted you here? To see it. May asked, see what? Reeve nodded toward the wall. Dozens of names carved in iron plaques, some familiar, some infamous. All marked with symbols. X's, arrows, flames. He's been tracking bloodlines, Reeve muttered. Corrupting law through legacy. Building a network. That doesn't need towns or elections? Just memory and leverage. The stranger stepped to a plaque. Jameson, BOO, and Marshall, Red Valley executed 1854. He stared for a long time. That's my father. Reeve nodded, and Calder signed his death order. May whispered, it's not about land. Or gold, the stranger's voice was hollow. It's about rewriting the West. A low rumble shook the floor. Lanterns swayed. From the far tunnel. Footsteps echoed, slow and deliberate. Then Calder emerged. Clean. Unharmed. And flanked by men in black coats, each with polished rifles and quiet eyes. You found it, he said. Good. The stranger raised his Colt. But Calder didn't flinch. I don't need to shoot you, Boone. Not anymore. Reeve gritted his teeth. Why show us this? Because you still think you're fighting for something that can be saved. May stepped forward, voice sharp. You think fear will make us lay down? Calder looked at her with the calm of a man who's already won. No, I think history will. Then he snapped his fingers and the lights went out. The darkness swallowed everything. The mine groaned. Then came the hiss of gas lamps igniting. Greenish, flickering flames along the ceiling, casting the chamber in sickly hues. Calder was gone. So were his men. The stranger cursed it under his breath. May spun. Rifle raised. He disappeared again, how? Reeve stepped toward the wall, feeling the stone. There's a pressure door, a false vein in the rock. Calder built this whole level as a fortress. The stranger looked at the twisted train engine, now lit from within by dull red light pulsing like a heart. He's not hiding anymore. He's staging something. May shook her head. Staging what? There's nothing out here but dirt and ghosts? No, Reeve said, eyes narrowing. There's a track, buried under stone, that leads back west. To where? She asked. He turned to the stranger. You remember Angel's End? The stranger's blood froze. It was a town-turned massacre. One that vanished off maps, hushed, up by rail barons and war commissions. He nodded once. I was there. That's where the train is heading, Reeve said. And when it does, May interrupted. He won't need to rewrite history. He'll erase it. A klaxon blared from somewhere deep in the mine. Red lights pulsed. Above, a tremor rippled through the floor. Then came the sound. Iron grinding against iron. The train was waking up, Reeve said. We have minutes, maybe less. The stranger looked. At the ceiling, a grated elevator shaft lined with rusted chains. I'll climb, he said. Cut him off at the ridge above. May grabbed his arm. You can't outrun a train on foot. I don't plan to. He looked at Reeve. Help. Her get out. Then he was gone, boots pounding across crates up the chain rail, disappearing into the dark. Reeve turned to May. Come on. There's a back shaft? We can get topside? But May shook her head. No, we stop this here. You'll die. I'd rather die than let him write my family out of the world. Reeve hesitated. Then offered her a stick of dynamite. Then let's rewrite him instead. Above ground, the stranger emerged into howling wind. Snow whipped across the ridge. Below, the entrance to the buried rail line cracked open like a wound, and the train surged forward. Black smoke billowing, its iron hull gleaming like war. Itself, he aimed his rifle. Not at the train, but at the signal tower beside it. One shot. Then another. The tower collapsed. Spilling gears and sparks, the train shrieked, veering, below, in the mine. May and Reeve lit the dynamite. Together. And as the train roared past them, they lit history on fire. The blast could be heard for miles. Rocks split. Iron screamed. A column. A fire burst from the heart of the ridge, swallowing snow and sky alike. The earth shook with such fury that birds scattered from forest long dead, and a dust cloud rolled over the basin like a rising tide. The stranger hit the ground hard, boots skidding on ice as the shockwave knocked him back. His hat vanished into the wind. He didn't notice he was already running. Smoke bled from the tunnel mouth, thick and acrid. Shattered stone rained down from the cliffs. The rail line, twisted like a coiled serpent, jutted up from the earth in useless angles. He dropped to his knees at the edge of the rubble, hands bleeding as he clawed at debris. May! No answer. Reeve? Nothing. Then dash movement. A cough. May's head broke through the dust, bruised and bleeding, eyes dazed but alive. The stranger pulled her up, wrapping her in his coat. Can you walk? She nodded, barely. What about Reeve? May looked back, the fire still raging behind her. A moment passed. Then she shook her head. He stayed behind. Held the fuse until the last second. The stranger didn't speak. He just lowered his eyes and gave a quiet nod, one outlaw's respect for another. They didn't stay long. By nightfall, the ridge still burned. Snow melted into rivers. Of ash they rode west, wounded and silent. Behind them, the train's wreckage still smoked, buried beneath tons of stone. Calder's body hadn't been found, but something told the stranger that wasn't the end of him, only the end of his empire. By the third day, they reached the edge of Red Bluff, a town so small it didn't have a sheriff, only an old bell tower and a one-eyed preacher who nodded silently as they rode past. May stayed at the infirmary. The stranger went to the saloon. Sat at the bar. Didn't order, just stared at the wall until the light faded. The bartender eventually asked, "You lookin' to forget or to remember?" The stranger answered, "Neither, just trying to decide what comes next." Outside, May sat beneath the same stars that had watched their ride begin. She pulled a small journal from her coat, opened to the last page, and wrote 3 words. He burned it, and she closed it, looked west, and smiled. A week passed. Then, another. Still no sign of Calder's body. The stranger and May lingered on the edge of Red Bluff, never fully unpacking, never fully resting. It wasn't over. Not yet. The past had a way of clawing out from shallow graves. On the 12th day, a rider came, young, dust-choked, barely able to stay upright. He brought a message, a seal burned into leather, a silver eye over broken scales. May's face went pale. The stranger took the note. No words, just a mark. He turned to May. "You recognize it?" She nodded. A tribunal mark from the old martial councils. "The ones disbanded after the war. I thought they were gone." "They are," she said, "which means someone wants you to think they've come back." He looked out at the fading horizon. "Where?" "Town called Silence," the rider rasped. "Desert basin, west of the divide." "You'll know it when you get there." Silence was true to its name. One main road, a church with no bell, windows boarded, streets swept too clean, no children. No dogs, just the sound of wind dragging secrets. Across dry boards, the stranger, May, and the boy, Thomas, the only surviving witness from Junction Ridge. Entered on foot, people watched from behind cracked curtains, but no one spoke. No. One welcome. At the center of town was a white building. Courthouse, maybe, or jail. Or both. A man stood on its steps. Broad shoulders. Suit too clean for dust country. Eyes like cut glass. "I've been expecting you," he said. The stranger stepped forward. "You sent the seal." The man nodded. "We had to be sure you'd survived." "Why?" "Because Calder wasn't acting alone." May's hand moved to her rifle. The man didn't flinch. He raised a piece of parchment, thick, old, official. It read, "Marshal Eli Boone, reinstated." The stranger stared. "This a joke?" "No, it's a reckoning." Behind him, doors opened. 2 figures stepped out. One was an old woman, blindfolded, carrying a book. The other was a man in chains, bruised, bloodied, but alive. Joseph Pike, May hissed. "I watched him bleed out." The suited man nodded. "You watched what Calder wanted you to see." Pike lifted his head. His eyes were hollow. "They're building something worse," he croaked. "Calder was just the start." The stranger took the badge. Held it in his palm like it weighed more than iron, then looked at the town around him, the eyes watching, the silence pressing down. "All right," he said. "You wanted a reckoning." He pinned the badge to his coat. "Let's give them one." They gave him an office in the old church. Dust thick on the pews, Bible pages chewed by rats, a bullet hole through the pulpit. He didn't clean it, just sat behind the desk and laid the badge. Flat like a scar across the wood. May stood at the doorway. You gonna wear it for real? The stranger looked up. It's not the badge that matters. It's what people think it means. Then you might want to shine it a little. He almost smiled. Thomas helped scrub blood from the steps of the courthouse. Most of it was Pike's, not from torture, but judgment. The tribunal didn't hang him. They didn't shoot him. They made him talk. Everything. Names. Roots. Codes. One name. Came up more than any other. Judge Tolliver, a man who hadn't been seen in public in 5 years, but according to Pike, he never left the West. He simply buried himself in law so thick no bullet could touch him. The stranger marked the name in a fresh ledger. May asked, "What's his role?" He was Calder's backer, the stranger said. Signed the pardons, erased the records, probably printed the badge. She nodded. Where? South. Territory border, town called Banners Hollow. May frowned. No one rides there? That's the point? They left that night. No banners. No promises. Just dust rising behind hooves and silence moving beside them. At dawn. They passed a burned-out farmhouse where children's toys still sat on a porch. Thomas looked away. May didn't. The stranger dismounted, walked to the door, found the hinges smashed. Blood dried into the threshold. Inside. 3 markers carved into the floorboards. One was a star, another, the silver eye, the third. A name. E.B. His own initials. He stepped back like struck. May caught him. What is it? They're not hunting. U.S., he whispered. They're framing us. She stared. If they kill enough in our name, they'll make us the villain. She finished. The stranger looked at the rising sun. That badge isn't a weapon. It's bait. They reached Banners Hollow after dark. No lights. No guards, just one sign. Truth is earned. Thomas asked, what's that mean? The stranger looked at May. It means the war ain't over. He touched the badge once, then drew his Colt. Time to collect what justice never paid. Banners Hollow. Wasn't a town. It was a monument to paranoia. Every building was wood on the outside and iron underneath. Doors had no handles, only knock patterns. Windows were mirrored from the inside. The wind didn't even whistle through the streets. It tiptoed. At the center stood a courthouse with no signage, no flag, no mercy. It looked like it had been built from railroad ties and reinforced with gilt. The stranger, May, and Thomas approached from the east. 2 guards stepped out, rifles in hand. One of them squinted. State your business. The stranger held up his badge. Marshal Boone, escorting a witness and delivering a warrant. The guards exchanged looks, then stepped aside. Judge Tolliver's expecting you. Inside it was colder than outside. Marble floors. Oil portraits of dead men. Every hallway turned twice before arriving anywhere, like truth was afraid of being found too fast. They were led into a chamber lit by gaslight. It wasn't a courtroom. It was a throne room. At the far end sat Judge Tolliver, white beard, black robes, eyes like thunderclouds frozen mid-boiled. Around him, a semicircle of clerks, all armed, all silent. You've come a long way, Boone, Tolliver said. His voice was smooth as paper over a knife. The stranger said nothing. Tolliver gestured to May and Thomas. And your witnesses? May stepped forward. We saw what Calder built, what Pike financed, what this council protected. Thomas nodded. I saw the train. Tolliver didn't blink. Do you have evidence? The stranger placed a ledger on the table, Calder's network, names, roots, bloodied fingerprints. And this, he added, tossing a badge, Calder's badge across. The floor. Tolliver looked down at it, then smiled, and slowly clapped. You did well, Marshal. You flushed out the weak, burned the unstable, cleared the field. May narrowed her eyes. What are you talking about? Tolliver stood. This wasn't a purge, it was a test. The stranger's hand moved toward his Colt. Tolliver raised his voice. You removed every disloyal piece from the board. You think you crippled our machine, but all you did was make it leaner. Behind him, the clerks moved in unison. May raised her rifle. Thomas stepped back. The stranger said coldly, then I'll burn what's left. Tolliver smiled wider. You can't burn shadows, son. Maybe not, the stranger said, but I can start with the man casting them. And with that gunfire erupted in the hollow court. The first bullet shattered the lantern overhead, plunging the chamber into flickering half-light. Shadows danced across the marble like spirits set free. May dropped to one knee and fired, clipping the first clerk before he could draw. The second lunged toward Thomas, but the boy had already ducked behind a column. Clutching the spare revolver she'd given him, the stranger moved forward. Not away, straight toward the bench. Tolliver didn't move, didn't flinch as if he knew none of the bullets would reach him. 3 more guards rushed in from the left corridor. Reeve would have handled them with blades. The stranger handled them with iron. 2 shots, 2 down. The third hesitated, young, unsure, and May yelled, "Run, kid!" He dropped his weapon and did. The stranger reached the dais. Tolliver still hadn't risen. "I gave you a badge," the judge said calmly, "and you made it mean something." The stranger aimed his Colt. "That's the problem." Tolliver tilted his head. "Shoot me, and I become a martyr. A ghost, a reason to keep this machine churning." The stranger paused, then lowered the gun slightly. "No," he said. "You're not a martyr. You're a file." He turned and fired into the floor behind the bench. Boards shattered, revealing a safe. May joined him, panting. "What is it?" "Proof," he said. He kicked the safe open. Inside, sealed ledgers, encoded correspondences, documents bearing the signatures of mayors, sheriffs, governors, every lie, every purchase, every erasure of justice, bound in ink and arrogance. May grabbed one and flipped through it. Her face went pale. "This is everything." Tolliver's voice echoed. "You don't understand what you're tampering with." The stranger turned to him. "No, Judge, you don't understand what we're fixing." Then he raised the gun again, but didn't fire. Instead, he turned to Thomas. "You want to be part of this?" Thomas swallowed, then nodded. The stranger handed him the badge. "You carry it, you carry all of it." The boy took it with trembling hands. Behind him, Tolliver sat still, defeated not by bullets, but by legacy. By truth. They left Banners Hollow at dawn. The courthouse burned behind them, flames licking the sky. Not out of revenge, but because truth sometimes needs light to rise from ashes. May rode beside the stranger. "You think this ends it?" He shook his head. "No, but it changes the story." She looked back once. Then forward. And for the first time, the trail didn't feel haunted. It felt earned. They rode east. Now. Not to run, but to reveal. The documents salvaged from Banners Hollow were real, dated, signed. They bore names too heavy to ignore. Judges, rail bosses, war profiteers, towns erased for mining rights, deputies hanged as scapegoats, blood traded for silence. May rode with them, sorting page after page by firelight. At camp, Thomas kept watch, the badge pinned to his coat. He didn't speak much anymore. He didn't have to, he understood. One night by the river fork at Dead Elk Crossing, the stranger leaned against a sycamore tree and opened the final ledger. His father's name appeared again, Jameson. Boone. Executed. Stamped. Approved by Tolliver. He stared at it long. May watched him from across the fire. "You okay?" "No." He closed the book gently. "But I'm awake." 3 towns later, word began to spread. A marshal who carried no jurisdiction but left order in his wake. A woman with eyes like flint who spoke the names of the dead, until even liars turned honest. And a boy who held justice too heavy for his shoulders, but never let it fall. They called them ghosts, they called them thieves, but they listened. One mayor burned his own books and fled to Mexico. 2 bounty hunters left their rifles behind and took up teaching. A preacher in Cold Mesa read from the ledgers at Sunday service, and the crowd wept. The story was changing, one name at a time. In Dust Hollow, the trio found a printing press, half broken, run by a woman with ink on her teeth and no patience for tyrants. They handed her the ledgers. "All of them?" She asked. "All of them," May said. "No edits, no erasures." The woman tapped her press. "You know what printing these means?" The stranger nodded. "It means we stop hiding." She squinted. "And your name?" He looked out the window, past the dry hills, toward the towns that still slept in someone else's silence, then turned back. "Boone. Marshall Boone." She nodded. "Then let's make history bleed." That night, they stayed in a half-burned inn on the edge of town. May couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, cleaning her rifle. Thomas slept, curled around the badge like a promise. The stranger stood out front, watching the wind stir the dust. May stepped beside him. "You ever think about what you'll do when it's over?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "If it ever ends, maybe I'll finally sleep." She smiled faintly. "Maybe we both will." He looked up at the stars, then at the horizon, and whispered, "Let's just make sure they wake up first." The printing press in Dust Hollow roared to life. By sunrise, the first pages were nailed to town posts, handed to wagoners, slipped into mailbags like contraband. Within 2 days, word had spread past county lines. Within 5, men who once rode tall began to ride quiet or not at all. The ledgers were called. The Iron Testament. Each page bore the same words across the top. "Let this not be justice delayed, but justice remembered. May Boone." And Thomas rode ahead of the storm they'd created, not to flee, to finish it, in a town called Larkspur Ridge. The last sheriff under Calder's pay tried to torch the posted pages. May shot the torch clean from his hand. The townsfolk watched in silence as he dropped to his knees, not from the gun but from the guilt. One of them helped him stand. Another took the badge from his coat and handed it to Thomas. He held it for a moment, then gave it back. "The badge isn't yours anymore," he said. "But maybe the work can be." They kept moving. No schedule. No script. In Rivets Hollow, a banker tried to pay them to leave. In Sandpoint, a preacher tried to excommunicate them. In Dry Widow, a woman offered her last loaf of bread just to say thank you, and still, Boone didn't slow. Because word came on the 7th day. A bell rang in Copper Hollow last night. The one Calder melted down. Nobody knows how. They rode there at once. Copper Hollow was smaller than a whisper. No sheriff. No post office. Just a mining tower long abandoned. And a bell that had hung silent since the war, but now it rang. Clear. Loud. Impossible. Thomas tilted his head. "You hear that?" Boone nodded. "Every soul in 50 miles hears that." May touched the rusted bell rope, frayed but moving. "It wasn't ghosts." "No," Boone said. "It was memory." They looked down into the canyon below, where a group of townsfolk had gathered in silence. Eyes lifted toward the tower. May whispered, "What now?" Boone turned, looked at the trail west. And said, "Now we ring every damn bell they buried." That night, as stars bled into the sky and coyotes sang like fiddlers lost to time, May wrote by the fire. Thomas practiced drawing and holstering with a stick, lips moving like he was preparing a speech, and Boone sat with the last page of the ledger. Only one name left, a name neither Calder nor Tolliver had ever dared write down, because it was their own. The name at the bottom of the final page was written in a different hand, older, angrier. No signature, just initials burned into the corner. T.E. Boone stared at them for a long while. Then he spoke, more to the fire than to May or Thomas. "Tolliver was the architect. Calder was the fire." May looked up. "So who's T.E.?" Boone closed the ledger. "The one who built the furnace." They rode out the next morning before dawn, the sky bruised with storm. A trader at the edge of Briar Bluff had given them a direction. Southwest, past the Devil's Spine, you'll find a house made of stone, sitting above the salt flats. They say the man who lives there don't breathe dust like the rest of us. May asked what that meant. The trader just spat and said, "Means he built the air we breathe." 3 days into the desert, the trail vanished. The wind carried no scent. The sun watched without blinking. And then, at the edge of nothing, they saw it. A house of black stone. No chimney, no door. Just an iron archway and a single bench out front, as if the desert itself had paused to listen. Boone dismounted. May followed. Hand on her rifle, Thomas stayed with the horses, his eyes wide. Boone stepped through the arch. No sound, no echo. Then a voice behind him. "You should have stayed a ghost." Boone turned. A man sat on the bench. Not old, not young. Clean boots, hands folded, eyes like still water. "T.E.?" Boone asked. The man nodded. "Theodore Elam, founder of the Tribunal, designer of the ledgers, first judge over the Iron Network." May moved beside Boone. "Why not sign your name?" Elam smiled faintly. "Names fade, ideas last, and this idea was meant to outlive the West." Boone stepped forward. "It didn't. We broke it." "No," Elam said. "You cleansed it. You did exactly what it needed. Revolution ... always resets the wheel." Boone's voice dropped low. "There won't be a reset. You think people will stop wanting order, justice, protection? I think they'll stop trusting men who sell those things like cattle." Elam leaned back. "Then shoot me, Marshal." Boone paused. Then shook his head. "No." He pulled a fresh book from his saddlebag, a blank ledger. "Sign your name." Elam stared at it. Boone continued. "Not for me. For the world. so they know who burned it down and who paid the price. Elam didn't move at first. Then, slowly, he reached for the book, took the pen, and signed Theodore Elam that night. The wind howled. And the truth found its last page. The return was quiet. No parades. No salutes. Only the sound of hooves over ash and stone, and the long shadow of justice finally catching up to its own name, Boone. May and Thomas rode into Granger's Pass as the sun dipped behind the cliffs. A boy rang a bell at the chapel tower. A blacksmith laid his hammer down mid-swing and nodded once. An old woman placed a folded page from the Iron Testament beside a candle in her window. Truth had changed shape, no longer whispered in dark saloons, but posted on doors and spoken aloud on porches. And the man who once walked with a bounty on his head now wore a star that couldn't be bought. At the saloon, Boone handed the final ledger to a man with ink-stained fingers and a crooked hat. "You'll know what to do?" he said. The man opened it. Saw the signature. His eyes widened. "You got Elam to sign?" Boone nodded. The man closed the book gently, like a tomb. "Then it's done." Boone glanced out the window, where May helped Thomas nail a fresh placard beside the old town notice board. The boy's shoulders stood taller now. The badge no longer looked oversized on his chest. "No," Boone said quietly. "Now it begins." They stayed the night in a barn just outside of town. May sat with her back to a hay bale, polishing her rifle, watching stars filter through a gap in the roof. "You think folks will remember what we did?" she asked. Boone, lying in the straw, eyes on the rafters, replied, "They won't need to." She looked at him. He added, "They'll feel it, in the way the sheriff rides. In the questions kids are allowed to ask, and the silence that finally ends." May smiled. "That's enough." Outside, Thomas kept watch, not because he had to, but because it mattered. Because now, the stories written in fire and dust belonged to someone else to carry forward. At dawn, a rider arrived, government seal, dusty boots, a folder in hand. He handed it to Boone without a word and wrote off. Boone opened it. Inside, a map, a list of names, a note. "The system isn't gone, it just moved, and it knows your name." He passed the folder to May. She read it, then looked to him. "You ready?" Boone holstered his Colt. "No." He mounted up. "But we ride anyway." And so they did. 3 figures moving into a dawn that had never known their kind before. Not lawmen. Not outlaws, but something else. The kind of people who didn't wait for justice. They carried it. The wind carried the scent of rain. It hadn't stormed in weeks. But the clouds above the mesa rolled like an angry sermon, thunder rumbling low as if the sky itself had something left to say. Boone stood alone at the ridge. May and Thomas waited by the horses below, giving him space. Before him lay a grave, marked not with stone but with a bent iron star. Rusted and half-buried, Jameson Boone Marshall, father, framed, freed, Boone, knelt. The last page of the final ledger in his hand. He folded it once, tucked it beneath the star, and whispered, "You were right. The West doesn't need men with badges. It needs men with truth." Behind him, May spoke softly, "You don't have to carry it anymore." He rose, looked out across the basin, where the horizon bled into the land like ink on parchment. "I'm not carrying it," he said. "I'm planting it." Thomas approached, holding something wrapped in cloth. When he unwrapped it, it wasn't a gun or a book, but a bell. Small, hand-cast, unmarked. "Where'd you get that?" May asked. He smiled. "Made it." Boone took it, ran his fingers across the edge. "You want to hang it?" Thomas nodded. Together, they climbed to the dead tree atop the ridge, the kind that didn't bloom, but never fell. They hung the bell. It didn't ring, but Boone didn't mind. He turned to the boy. "Someday, someone else will hear it," May added, "and they'll know where to find the story." They rode east. Not because it was over, but because stories like dust, drift, and thunder only waits for silence to forget. As they vanished into the rising storm, 3 figures on the trail, a gust of wind swept across the ridge, and the bell rang. Once. Clear. Final. Like an oath. It began with a letter. No seal. No return mark. Just 3 words scrawled in red ink. They kept digging. Boone found it pinned to the saddle of his horse one cold morning near Black Basin. He showed it to May without a word. Thomas read it next and didn't speak for a while. Then, "Where?" Boone looked to the south, somewhere they weren't supposed to. They followed the letter sent to Dustwater Gorge, where the earth had once split from a mining blast during the war, But the canyon had changed. Rusted cranes loomed like skeletal birds. Fresh rails gleamed along the gorge floor. New tunnels, too. Clean, too, precise bored into stone that had not seen light in 1,000 years. And at the mouth of the largest shaft, a wooden sign hung crooked. Whisper Line Depot. Private contract only, May muttered. What the hell is this? Boone stared at the dark. I think they're building again. Thomas gripped the badge pinned to his vest. Then we break it. Inside the tunnel, everything smelled of oil and cold metal. Boone touched the walls. Concrete. Steel reinforcement. This wasn't a mine. It was a bunker. They passed rooms filled with crates marked in ciphered code. Maps detailing ghost towns, places that had disappeared with no explanation. In one chamber, Thomas found a wall covered in faces sketched in charcoal. Some were crossed out, some weren't. May stepped back, eyes wide. That's you. And Boone saw it too. His face. May single quotes S. Thomas single quotes. Not drawings. Targets. The deeper they went, the colder it got. Not just the air, the silence. It wasn't the kind of quiet born of wind and stone. It was engineered. Every surface swallowed sound. Every corridor was shaped to muffle footfalls. A place not built for people. Built for secrets. Boone gritted his teeth. This wasn't Calder's. May nodded. This was before him. They passed a chamber with iron cells long cold, but not abandoned. On the floor lay tools, wires, old blood. A cage large enough for a man, smaller ones for others. Thomas recoiled. They kept children here. May whispered, no. They studied them. Boone picked up a sheet of paper from the floor, smeared and half-burned. Still legible. Subject 14 retains memory after 9-day isolation. Language deteriorates by choice. Primary instinct obedience to marked authority. He folded it slowly, eyes dark, then torches flickered ahead. Not theirs. A second group was in the tunnels. May led them to a narrow shaft that overlooked a lower catwalk. Shadows moved. 7 or 8 men, black coats, white gloves. They circled around a steel cylinder the size of a freight wagon, half buried in rock. Boone whispered, "What the hell is that?" Thomas answered, voice low, "That's a drop core. For demolition, it's wired to the canyon floor." May's eyes widened. "They're going to collapse the whole gorge." Boone growled, "They're wiping this place. Erasing names, erasing proof." They acted fast. May took the left flank, her rifle biting the dark. Thomas circled wide, climbing to the control deck above. Boone dropped straight into the middle, boots on steel, gun drawn. The first man he shot didn't scream, just dropped. The second turned and tried to pull a charge lever. May put a bullet through his wrist. Boone reached the core's ignition housing. Thomas, working on it. Sparks flew above as the boy ripped wires from a power panel. Below, May covered Boone's flank, her rounds echoing like the thunder of justice. A final guard rushed the catwalk. Boone stepped forward, not fast, but solid, and drove his shoulder into the man's gut, sending him off the edge. Then silence, only the click of the ignition failing. Thomas stood above, panting. Disabled. May gave a nod. "Then we bury this on our terms?" Boone turned to her. "No more running. No more hiding," she said. They planted charges in the sidewalls, not to collapse the gorge entirely, but to seal the tunnel behind them. To make sure no one ever opened the whisper line again. As they exited the shaft, dust at their heels and fire in their breath, Thomas paused. Carved above the tunnel's edge were the words, "Oblivion is order." He spit in the dirt. Then nailed a page from the Iron Testament to the rocks beside it. Not anymore. The whisper line fell behind them, buried beneath fire and silence. Not erased, just sealed. Boone, May, and Thomas stood on the ridge as the sun broke through storm-gray clouds. The first real light they'd seen in days, the kind that didn't hide behind dust or shame. The boy turned to Boone. "You think it's over?" Boone didn't answer at first. He watched the canyon burn behind him, watched the smoke twist upward like a story leaving the mouths of those who'd never been heard. Then he said, "We ended something," May added, "and started something better." They returned to Dust Hollow. Quietly. No bells rang. No crowds waited. But there was a fresh page on the notice board. A child had drawn the 3 of them, not perfectly, but clearly. Boone's hat, May's long rifle, Thomas holding the badge, like it was part of his hand now. Beneath it, one word, "Remember." That evening in the rebuilt saloon, Boone finally removed the badge from his coat. He didn't discard it. He He placed it in a glass case above the fireplace. May stepped beside him. Retiring? No, he said, passing the weight. He turned to Thomas, who stood near the hearth with a new coat, newly patched boots, and eyes that had seen too much, but still wanted to see more. Time for you to write the next book, Boone, said. Thomas looked unsure. What if I get it wrong? Boone smiled, just barely, then write it again. But make sure it's yours. May eventually drifted west, they say, joined a circuit of frontier schools, teaching children to read and teaching teachers how to teach truth. In one town, she posted an Iron Testament page on the schoolhouse wall. By spring, 3 more towns had done the same. Boone? He stayed until the trails called again. Not to fight. To listen. To follow the stories that had gone quiet too long. He was last seen in a place called Widow's Reach, staring out at the mountains, pen in hand, writing something no one ever read, but they say the wind carried his words anyway. And Thomas? He kept writing, not as a boy with a badge, but as a man who remembered why it mattered. The last entry in the Second Iron Testament bore his handwriting. Not all legends wear dust. Some walk with it, some carry it, and some teach the next to lift it.